The call came at 6:47 in the morning. I know because I was already up, already standing at the kitchen window with my coffee, watching the sprinklers come on in the backyard the way they do every Tuesday. Raymond installed that irrigation system the year before he passed, 12 years ago now. I've kept every timer exactly as he said it. My phone lit up on the counter. My son's name. I picked up before the second ring. Mom. His voice was wrong. Not the wrong of a car accident or a hospital. The wrong of someone who has been crying for a long time and run out of tears. Flat. Scraped clean. I'm at the park. The one near Ridgewood. I've got the kids with me. I set down my coffee. Which park? I said. Not a question. A confirmation. By the duck pond. Mom, I didn't know where else to go. I was already walking toward the garage. Don't move, I told him. I'm coming. I found him on a bench near the water. My son is 41 years old and built like his father, broad through the shoulders, the kind of man people assume can handle anything. He was sitting hunched forward with his elbows on his knees and my 2 grandchildren pressed against him on either side. My grandson Oliver, who is 9 and refuses to show weakness in front of anyone, had his face turned into his father's arm. My granddaughter Penny, who was 6 and still young enough to let the world see her cry, was asleep against his ribs with dried tears on her cheeks. There were 2 duffel bags and a rolling suitcase at his feet. The suitcase had a broken wheel. It was tilted sideways in the dirt. I stood there for a moment before he saw me. I wanted to remember it, not because it was beautiful, because I needed to understand exactly what had been done to my family before I decided what to do about it. He looked up and I saw his face and I thought, I raised this man. I know every version of him. I have never seen this one before. Get up, I said quietly. Let's get the kids in the car. I live 20 minutes from that park. It took me 3 minutes longer that morning because I drove the back way past the elementary school, so Oliver could see it through the window and have something to focus on besides whatever was pulling at him inside. He's a child who needs anchors. I know my grandchildren. I got them home. I got Penny settled on the couch with the quilt my mother made and put cartoons on the television. I got Oliver set up at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and the kind of quiet dignity a 9-year-old boy needs when his world has come apart. I put a plate of toast in front of my son, who did not touch it, and I sat down across from him with my coffee and I said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning." He told me. It took a long time. My son had been married for 11 years. I want to be careful here, because the marriage itself is not the story, and my daughter-in-law is not a villain in what I'm about to tell you. She was a woman who made choices under pressure I didn't fully understand until later. She and my son had grown apart in the way that sometimes happens quietly over years, like water wearing down stone. By the time either of them noticed the damage, it was already deep. They had separated 8 months earlier. It was civil. They were trying to be adults about it for the sake of the children. My son had moved into a rental in the same school district. He was paying his share, showing up for every pickup and drop-off, coaching Oliver's soccer team on Saturday mornings. He was doing everything right. The problem was his father-in-law. I had never trusted that man. I want to say that plainly. I had sat across from him at holidays for 11 years and smiled and passed the green beans and kept my thoughts to myself. Because that is what you do, and because my son was happy, and because being right about someone is worth nothing if the cost is your child's peace. But I'd never trusted him. He was the kind of man who kept score, who gave gifts with conditions attached, who used money as a language, and always made sure he was the only fluent speaker in the room. When my son and his wife separated, this man decided that my son was the problem, the obstacle, the thing standing between his daughter and some imagined better life, and he decided to remove him. What he did first was legal, or at least legal adjacent. He called in a favor from a former business associate who sat on the board of the property management company. My son's rental was through. My son received a notice. The unit was being reclaimed for renovation. He had 30 days. I didn't know this yet. My son hadn't told me because he was handling it. That's the thing about raising capable children. Sometimes they handle things right up until they can't. What happened next was not legal. My son works in commercial HVAC. He's been doing it for 16 years. He's good at it. And 18 months ago, he put everything he had saved into buying a service route from a retiring technician. Essentially a small client book, recurring maintenance contracts, a business of his own. He was proud of it. He had every reason to be. His father-in-law knew people. That was his great talent in life, knowing people and knowing what those people wanted. He made some calls. 3 of my son's largest commercial clients received what appeared to be licensing documentation suggesting his contractor certifications had lapsed and were under review. It was fabricated, completely fabricated. But by the time my son could get in front of anyone to explain, 2 of the clients had already suspended their contracts. A third had sent a formal termination letter, and the cash flow that his whole operation depended on had been cut by 60% in 6 weeks. He came to the park that morning because he had paid his bills, he had paid his share, he had done everything right, and he had still run out of road. His ex-wife had called the night before to say the kids should probably stay with her for a while, given his situation. His father-in-law had apparently suggested this. She had agreed. When my son went to pick up Oliver and Penny for his scheduled week, his father-in-law opened the door instead and told him the children were staying. My son had stood on that porch for 20 minutes trying to reason with a man who had no interest in reason. Then he had driven to that park and sat down on a bench and called me. He told me all of this in my kitchen while his children watched cartoons in the next room. When he finished, I nodded. I picked up his toast and put it back in front of him. Eat something. I said, I need to make some calls. I should tell you what my son doesn't fully know about me, because he's of a generation that didn't ask their parents certain questions, and I was of a generation that didn't offer certain answers. Raymond and I built a company together. He was the face of it, and I was the foundation, which suited us both fine. We did commercial real estate development. Not flashy, not headline-making, but solid. We bought distressed industrial properties in secondary markets and rebuilt them into functional spaces. Warehouses, distribution centers, mixed-use light commercial. We did it for 31 years. When Raymond died, I sold the operating business but kept the property holdings, because the operating business was Raymond's gift and the properties were mine, and I knew the difference. Over the following years, I restructured, brought in a property manager, simplified what needed simplifying, and held on to what I knew had value. I am not wealthy in the way people mean when they say the word carelessly, but I am comfortable in the way that is actually more useful. I have relationships, I have history with institutions, and I have, over the decades, done favors for people who remember them. My son knew I was fine. He did not know the specifics because I had never wanted money to change the way he moved through the world. I wanted him to build his own thing, which he had done. I was proud of him for that. I was also, sitting at my kitchen table that morning, very clear about what I had available to me. The first call I made was to a woman named Sandra, who has been my attorney for 22 years. I reached her before 8. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "The licensing documentation angle is wire fraud if it crossed state lines. Even if it didn't, it's tortious interference. I want the name of the clients and the name of whoever they received the documents from." The second call was to a man I'll call by his first name only, which is James. James had been Raymond's banker before he became my banker, and before that he had been a federal examiner. He knows how money moves, and he knows what it looks like when it moves wrong. I told him what I needed. He said, "Give me 48 hours. I made 2 more calls. One to a commercial licensing investigator I'd worked with on a property dispute 12 years ago. One to my son's largest remaining client, a property manager I knew personally from a conference we'd both attended in Charlotte 3 years back. I explained that my son's certifications were entirely current, that he had been targeted by a deliberate disinformation effort, and that I would have documentation to that effect within the week. He told me he'd put the termination on hold pending review. I hung up and went to check on the children. Oliver had finished his cereal and was sitting on the floor by the couch, explaining something to Penny with a very serious expression. Penny was holding a crayon and nodding. This is their private language, those two. I stood in the doorway and watched them, and something settled in my chest. Not calm exactly, something harder than calm. Here is what James found in 48 hours. My son's father-in-law was a man with a long history of moving money in ways that were creative and not quite visible to the naked eye. He had a consulting arrangement with a development company that had received permits on 3 projects in the county over the past 4 years. The permits had moved quickly, unusually quickly, and the county commissioner who had expedited them had a brother-in-law employed by that same consulting firm. This was not directly related to what he had done to my son, but it was the kind of information that, placed in the right hands, had a way of clarifying a person's priorities. Sandra confirmed the wire fraud angle. The licensing documents had been generated by a company registered in Delaware and emailed from a server in Virginia. 2 state lines. She had already filed a report with the FBI field office and contacted a civil litigator she trusted. The commercial licensing investigator confirmed that someone had made an inquiry to the state licensing board, not a formal complaint, but a planted question, the kind designed to create a paper trail that could then be waved at clients as under review. This was the mechanism. It was sophisticated enough to be malicious and sloppy enough to be traced. My son sat with me when I laid all of this out on the kitchen table. He was very quiet. "Mom," he said finally, "how are you doing all of this?" "I've been alive a long time," I told him. "I've paid attention." My son's father-in-law had a habit of attending a monthly breakfast meeting with a group of local business and civic figures at a downtown hotel. The kind of gathering where men who consider themselves important reinforce that belief in each other. I knew 2 people who attended regularly. I asked one of them to let me know the next date. The following Thursday, I drove downtown and parked in the hotel garage. I wore a gray suit I've had for 15 years that still fits exactly right. I walked into the lobby and sat in a chair near the restaurant entrance with a cup of coffee and waited. He came out with 3 other men at 9:10, laughing at something completely at ease. That ease, that assumption of safety, told me everything I needed to know about how he had lived his life. Things had always resolved in his favor. He had always been the one who made calls, not the one who received them. He saw me and stopped. I stood up. "Good morning," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I think we should talk." The men he was with looked between us. He told them he'd catch up. They moved on with the particular polished discomfort of men who know when to disappear. We sat down in 2 chairs by the window. He arranged his expression into something careful and said, "I don't know what my daughter has been telling you, but—" "Your daughter hasn't told me anything," I said. "I'm not here about your daughter. I'm here about my son." And about a Delaware-registered company and some fraudulent licensing documents, and a question that shouldn't have been asked at the state licensing board. His careful expression didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. I said, "My attorney has already filed with the federal field office. The civil case is being structured separately. What I'm here to tell you, personally, this morning before any of that moves forward, is that the outcome of this depends entirely on what you do in the next 2 weeks. That sounds like a threat. It's a schedule," I said. "My son's clients need to receive written confirmation from you on letterhead that the licensing information they received was erroneous and that his certifications are and have always been fully current. His lease, or a comparable replacement in the same school district, needs to be reinstated or secured. And the suggestion that his children should be withheld from him ends today." He leaned back. He was trying to find the power position in the conversation and couldn't locate it. I recognized the search. I'd watched Raymond do it with difficult negotiators for 30 years. The difference was that Raymond always found it. "You don't know what you're getting into," he said finally. I looked at him for a moment. "I'm 67 years old," I said. "I've buried my husband, managed a property portfolio through 2 recessions, and raised a son alone for the last 12 years. I promise you, I know exactly what I'm getting into. The question is whether you understand what you've walked into." I put Sandra's business card on the table between us. "She's expecting to hear from you," I said, "or from your attorney. Either is fine." I picked up my coffee cup and stood up. "Have a good morning." He called Sandra's office the following Monday. It took 3 weeks for the letters to reach my son's clients. It took 4 weeks for the licensing board record to be formally corrected, and the inquiry to be officially closed as unfounded. The 3rd client who had terminated reinstated the contract. The 2 who had suspended lifted the suspension. My son found a house to rent 8 doors down from his former rental. Same school district, better yard or garage he can use as a workspace. I paid the security deposit. He argued with me about it. I told him it was a loan and we'd settle it later, and he accepted that because it gave him the shape of his own dignity, which was what he needed. The custody arrangement went back to what it was supposed to be. My daughter-in-law, to her credit, called me herself when it was over. She was quiet on the phone for a moment, and then she said, "I should have pushed back harder." I told her that what mattered was the kids, and that was true, and I meant it. The federal matter is still open as of when I'm telling you this. I don't know exactly how it ends. James tells me the permit questions are being looked at by a separate set of eyes, which may or may not result in anything formal. I hold that loosely. Justice moves at its own pace, and I am old enough to know that pressing it rarely helps. What I know is this. My grandson Oliver started sleeping through the night again. My granddaughter Penny made a drawing last week of our family and taped it to my refrigerator. My son sent me a text on Sunday that said only the Ridgewood account just renewed, signed a new contract, 3-year term. I stood in my kitchen and read it twice. Then I went back to my coffee and the window and the sprinklers coming on in the backyard, the same as they do every Tuesday, the same as Raymond set them 12 years ago now. Some things you protect because they're valuable. Some things you protect because they're yours. My family is both, and I have never in my life waited for someone else to do what I could see needed doing. That's not strength. That's just paying attention long enough to know what matters. Whatever you're carrying right now, whoever is standing between you and the people you love, I want you to know something. They are counting on your silence. They built their whole plan around the assumption that you would not know what to do, or that you would be afraid, or that you would be afraid, or that you would wait. Don't wait. You know more than they think you do. You are more than they have accounted for. And the people on that bench, with their broken suitcase and their dried tears, they are worth every uncomfortable conversation, every early morning phone call, every moment of sitting across a table from someone who expected to be the most powerful person in the room. They are worth it. Go get them. I've thought a lot about what made that morning different from other hard mornings I've had in my life. There have been plenty. You don't get to 67 without collecting a few. What I keep coming back to is this. My son's father-in-law never once considered that there might be a consequence, not because he was stupid. He wasn't. But because for his entire life, consequences had been something that happened to other people. He had arranged his world carefully so that he was always the one initiating, never the one receiving. He confused that arrangement with safety. He mistook the absence of opposition for the absence of capability. That's a specific kind of blindness, and I've watched it ruin people before. It's not the blindness of ignorance. It's the blindness of a man who has never had to sit still long enough to ask himself, who else is in this room that I haven't accounted for? He hadn't accounted for me. That was his mistake, and it was the only one he needed to make. But here's what I want to say carefully, because I think it matters. What I did wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was 31 years of paying attention, of building relationships honestly, of doing work that was worth doing and treating people in ways they remembered. Sandra didn't pick up before 8 in the morning because I was powerful. She picked up because I had never wasted her time in 22 years. James didn't make calls on my behalf because I asked. He did it because the kind of trust we had built doesn't expire. Every resource I had available to me on that morning was the direct result of choices I had made long before that morning existed. That's how cause and consequence actually works. Not as punishment and reward handed down from somewhere above, just as the simple, patient arithmetic of a life. What you put in accumulates, what you take accumulates, and sooner or later you find out which column is larger. My son had done everything right. He had shown up, paid his share, coached the soccer team, built his own business with his own hands. And still someone tried to dismantle it. I want to be honest about that, because I think it would be dishonest to suggest that doing right protects you from everything. It doesn't. What it does is ensure that when something comes for you, you are not standing alone. He wasn't alone. That's the whole story, really. Oliver is sleeping through the night again. Penny's drawing is still on my refrigerator. My son signed a 3-year contract with a client who almost walked away. These things are not small. I refuse to treat them as small. I refuse to treat them as small. What I hope you take from this, if you take anything, is not a strategy or a checklist. It's simpler than that. Build things that last. Treat people as if they'll remember how you treated them, because they will. Do the quiet, unglamorous work of being someone whose word means something. And when the people you love are sitting on a park bench with a broken suitcase and no idea what comes next, be someone who already knows. Not because you planned for this exact moment, but because you spent a lifetime becoming someone capable of meeting it. That's all any of us can do, and it turns out it's enough.